to this webinar. Exciting to see the number of people we have in our midst. And I know that today we've already learned a few things from Jacinta. I know that we'll be learning a lot. So please listen. If you have questions, note them. You can drop them in the questions box. I think there is one. And we'll come back to it. And if there are questions you feel is not properly answered or you need more, should I say more guidance or support, or you just want to connect with the network of over 100 women, please send us an email. So now, again, thank you, Jacinta, for that presentation. I think that was really wonderful. So going into it, we would like to invite Dr. Milton, who is the general coordinator, and he would be speaking. He's the general coordinator and the co-founder of Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. I know many of you know him, Dr. Milton Ballet. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing the name properly. He'll be giving us our keynote address. So over to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. My name I thought would be very, very easy to pronounce. It's Million.
Million, okay.
Million Palai. It's a difficult name, Ethiopian name. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this beautiful place. I was looking at your program and what you are doing, and it's very, very much impressive. If you don't mind, I would like to read what I've prepared, and I promise that it will not be more than 5 minutes. So the title of my intervention will be Reclaiming Indigenous Foods, Use Innovation, Culture, and the Future of African Gastronomy. I would like to begin with a simple observation. Indigenous foods are not relics of the past. They are the foundations of Africa's future. For too long, African food systems have been viewed through the lens of crisis. Food shortage, climate shocks, rising prices, and dependence on imports. Today, I was asked to write, a paragraph as an input for the IPES Food, International Panel of Experts on the Sustainability of Food, because there is a new report that's coming up. It's not released yet, and the content of the report is grim. I think some extracts, if I read some extract to you, 645 million people, 7.8 of the world population face hunger in 2025, 61 million more than before the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019. Despite some marginal progresses, 1 in 4 people worldwide, 2.1 billion, were food insecure, lacking regular access to sufficient food and an active and healthy life. Well, the report about Africa is very bad. Africa is now the global epicenter of hunger. 1 in 5 Africans record 309 million people face hunger, an increase of 81% since 2010, driven by conflict, climate shocks, debt, and dependence on food imports. 2/3 of Africans cannot afford a healthy diet, more than double that share of Asia and Latin America. So this is, a reality, a grim report. But while these challenges are real, they should not define our future. Africa possesses one of the richest food heritage in the world. Thousands of crop varieties, livestock breeds, wild foods, medicinal plants, and culinary traditions have sustained communities for generations. They are not simply part of culture, they are part of our resilience. Unfortunately, many of these foods are disappearing. This is not because they have failed us, but because our policies, market, research, systems, and education have increasingly favored a narrow range of commercial crops and highly processed foods. The result is a paradox. We are losing biodiversity while hunger, malnutrition, obesity, and diet-related diseases are all increasing. This is why agroecology and food sovereignty are so important. Agroecology creates the ecological conditions for indigenous foods to flourish. It protects biodiversity, regenerates soil, conserves water, and values the knowledge of farmers and indigenous peoples. Food sovereignty goes a step further by asking a fundamental question: who decides what we grow, what we eat, and how our food systems are governed? Without food sovereignty, indigenous foods become museum pieces. With food sovereignty, they become a living component of vibrant local economies, healthy diets, and resilient communities. However, protecting indigenous foods requires more than celebrating them. We need supportive public policies. Government should recognize farmers manage these systems. They have to invest in agroecological research. They need to support local procurement for schools and public institutions. They need to strengthen territorial markets and create incentives for farmers who conserve agricultural biodiversity. We must also ensure that trade and seed policies do not undermine the diversity that farmers have nurtured over centuries. The African Union commitments under the Kampala Declaration, together with the growing recognition of agroecology across the continent, provide an important opportunity. But commitments must now translate into concrete investments and implementation. I also want to emphasize the role of young people and women. Too often, we speak of young or youth as beneficiaries. We should instead recognize them as innovators, entrepreneurs, chefs, communicators, researchers, and movement builders. Across Africa, young people are discovering indigenous ingredients, creating new food business, promoting healthy diets through social media, documenting traditional knowledge, and connecting gastronomy with culture, tourism, and climate action. Our responsibility is not to tell young people what to preserve or to revitalize. It is to create the enabling environment in which they can innovate while remaining rooted in African food heritage. Finally, I believe we need to change the narrative. Africa is often portrayed as a continent that must import technologies, seeds, and solutions. Yet one of the greatest strengths already exists in our fields: forests, kitchens, and communities. Indigenous foods are not symbols of poverty or the past. They are source of health, dignity, in identity, biodiversity, and economic opportunity. If we truly want to transform African food systems, we must move beyond crisis management towards food sovereignty, building systems that are locally rooted, ecologically resilient, culturally meaningful, and economically just. The future of African gastronomy will not be secured by abandoning our heritage. It will be secured by reclaiming it, celebrating it, and investing in it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so please let's give him a round of applause, a virtual round of applause. Thank you, Dr. Million. I think this is the energy we need to take going forward. Our heritage has to be secured by us first. We can't abandon an heritage and expect other people to help us secure our heritage. We need to change the narrative. We spent years, decades being seen as the poverty center of the world, as the center of crisis, violence, and all. We need to change the narrative. Thank you so much, Dr. Million. Thank you for that. Okay, so we'll jump right into it. We have introduced this topic. I think Jacinta, Dr. Million has basically put the ball in our court, right? How do we ensure that we are taking our heritage seriously? How do we ensure that we are projecting our heritage as we want to, right? And that's why we're having this wonderful topic today. Like I said, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. I think there's a question box as well. Please do that, and we will start. So for this conversation, we are looking at reclaiming indigenous foods, looking at youth innovation, culture, and the future of African gastronomy. We have amazing speakers who will join us. And I would like by introducing every one of them and going to each and every one of them individually. So first off, we have Chef Jody, who would be speaking to us, Jody Ann Palmer. We have Dr. Ann. Ann would also be here talking to us as well. And finally, we also have Chef Amaka, who would be speaking to us about this topic. So you're going to be hearing from amazing chefs who are well respected across the globe. And we're also going to be hearing a policy expert. I like what Dr. Million talked about policy, about markets. I know he talked about the fact that we need to have policies that support us. Dr. Ann will be talking about that. We're talking about market. We're talking about supply chain, because without that, the food systems is fragmented, is broken. We can't really do anything without the support of the government. So we're going to be looking at this topic holistically. To start us off, I would like to invite Dr. Ann to do her introduction. She would tell us about herself and also give us a reflection about the topic. Over to you, Dr. Ann.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me as a fellow African to this wonderful and such an incredible, vibrant body of women, leaders coming together, really. And it addresses that point. Africa is not waiting for help anymore. You're helping yourselves with your treasure, and your treasure is that food. So I'm Dr. Annie Trevennan-Jones. I'm former Zimbabwean. I live in the Netherlands now. I worked for the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, mostly working between national and local governments and around markets and values-based food procurement. So those are two different types of markets. One, the government buys, often for school meals, and the other one is all these little markets along the way that even cross borders across territories. Now working with C40 cities on urban-rural relationships, seeing big, large and mega cities, including like Lagos, which are huge anchor cities, and where's their food coming from and how's it coming from? These are opportunities to reshape those food systems. So really looking at the whole food system. So without further ado, on to the indigenous markets. I think most of us who've been to any market, we will just see a lot of food, and a lot of it is indigenous, but it is in small amounts. Everybody's got a small amount of this. You've got a variety. You've got everything from amaranth, if I think of Tanzania and Kenya. You've got your African nightshades, your jute, your pumpkin leaves, even baobab fruits and seeds, the African, the apple, the star apple. So much incredible diversity out there still in the system, still moving. I mean, we look at, there's very little data, which has been frustrating across the whole of Africa, about how much food is moving through these, what we call informal, but often they are formalized in some way, food systems right across Africa. We have had some research that says anywhere between 60 and 90% of food is moving through these local and traditional markets and crossing huge amounts of territory. So food is moving. It's just not being acknowledged. It's not being coordinated, and it often doesn't get financing because lots of small people in the value chain, sometimes they're growing on tribal trust land, which doesn't actually then have a financial credibility to go and get money from the bank. Other times it's kind of a lack of coordination, and it's trying to do the same system in a new way. When we think about all the value of bringing lots of smallholder farmers, women, young youth in the value-based SMEs, the hidden middle as we call them, we tend to ignore the fact that they do need support and that coordination is good. Coordinating is resilience. If we can coordinate all these small growers as opposed to saying, here's one big grower, please bring us your food. That is a lack of resilience. But nobody actually has really got this whole thing, and that there's an opportunity. Africa already has systems around digital payments that are starting to think about how one can coordinate. You've got those small, in a market, lots of these small finance savings groups. There are already the innovations to support bringing a lot of this food. What we don't have is, we don't have it as mainstream. We have a kind of, okay, occasionally we're going to have some amaranth that's in season. We need to change that psychology to say, isn't it great? This is the season of amaranth, and this is the season of arrowroots, and not always expect to have all year round the same food. And that's where indigenous foods come in, along with the fact that it's intergenerational. It's those grandparents, the grandmothers who have all of that knowledge, and every time there's a festive occasion, a lot of these indigenous foods come out and are celebrated, but they're not mainstreamed. And that's where you're having a gap in the market. The supply and demand is understanding that it's okay not to have the same food the whole year round, have all of this diversity. We do know that it's drought resistant often. You use less chemicals, less fertilizers. There are some barriers with agroecology and organic certification. One is the cost to get it and then to reapply for every year to make sure you are still compliant. The other one is the time, and this is what they're finding even in Brazil. People want to get certification, even if it's voluntary, and sometimes they have these participatory guarantee schemes, but women don't often have a lot of available time to go on and do all these courses and practice them. And the other one is when you do convert to organic and you move your amaranth to scale it sufficiently, there are some challenges there. We need more research. We need to find out what else you can grow complementary with it. Some of this food is gathered. That's the other thing to understand is how do we fit a new system and use all the technology and all of the social capital of those grandparents, of those youth in the value system. If anything, the youth are a benefit because they're always on the cutting edge. So they're able to re-envision and reimagine all these wonderful traditional foods that really is an incredible solution. We in policy, we also need to look at it. We often don't see it, for example, in school meals policy. We're not seeing enough of what indigenous foods could come in. We
Dr.
already know. Oh, sorry. So, but things like baobab supplementation within food, so children get to be more familiar with our indigenous foods. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see the passion behind you. I mean, you're talking about case studies and helping us even beyond Africa, what's going on. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I love this energy. We were going to use it in our conversation when we fully start. So over to you, Chef Jody, for your introduction and reflection. Reflection, please.
Oh, that's a hard act to follow, Dr. Anne. Awesome. You shared such great information about a subject that I'm certainly very passionate about as well. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Chef Jody Ann Palmer. I'm the founder of and CEO of a business called the Food Design Agency. We have been in the market globally for 18 years, very much in this space as well as in hospitality development education. And I'm the co-founder of a business called Mark Sciences, where we specifically focus on exactly this subject. So thank you very much for having me here to talk, and it's wonderful to be back in the network, sharing a little bit of information. Now, this is a subject I could speak about for days, no matter 6 minutes. So what I've tried to do is really focus on the subject of the reclamation of the actual ingredients and why I feel it's so important, a little bit of history and a little bit of a topic about how beautiful our ingredients are and how lucky and blessed we are to have such a resource. As I said, the topic is incredibly personal to me. It's the realization that everything I've chased around the world in my career, in my journeys, in my culinary background and science background, including the techniques and excellence, was already here, right here. I'm in South Africa, by the way. Apologies, I should have said that to start off with. I'm in South Africa, but I've also had the opportunity to work globally. So all the ingredients were already here, chasing all these things, yet the essence of what I was chasing was right on my doorstep. And the food in the continent has been eaten for thousands and thousands of years. My work now at the moment is to prove it, elevate it, and I'm going to really do this and try to do this to hand it over to the next generation as an opportunity, not a relic. It's really important to me. Jumping straight into it, I'm sorry about the light. Jumping straight into it, I want to begin with a small contradiction that I can't stop thinking about, and I've been thinking about it now post Dr. Anne and post Dr. Million's discussions, which were really great. And that's using the baobab as a perfect example. Right now in wellness shops across from London to LA to even on our own continent, people are paying a huge premium for powder called baobab. They told it's a superfood, and they're not wrong in saying that baobab has almost, it's a superfood. It has almost 4 times vitamin C of an orange and around 10 times the fiber of an apple. And what's really great about that fiber is it's prebiotic. This is where I'm going to have to hold myself back because this is where I get really excited about the properties of these ingredients. The baobab feeds good bacteria in our gut. It's really genuinely extraordinary. But here is the contradiction. The same fruit is falling from trees and is hanging on trees right across our continent. It's often ignored, it falls on the floor, it rots. And what's so sad is that our own children walk past these fruits and they run off to buy a packet of imported chips. And they don't understand the value of what is around them. And that's where the subject is so exciting because it's about the re-education of this material, and it goes back to the intergenerational subject that Dr. Anne spoke about. So the world is discovering our food while we're quietly forgetting it, which makes us really sad. So let me reframe for the next few minutes. Africa never needed the word superfood. We invented the thing itself. So, for example, fonia, a tiny grain. I'm sure those of you in West Africa will be familiar with it. Soup, also, it's the most incredible product. It's been grown for thousands of years. It's really rich in amino acids. Most cereals lack and it's really high in things like iron. It increases the glycemic index. It thrives on drought, which is fantastic on our continent because that's where so many of our crops fail, as you know. So we often looking for these hardier superfood crops. And it's really high in calcium, and yet it's smaller than a poppy seed. Now, it's just mind-blowing. Moringa leaves, for example, contain all 9 essential amino acids. Did you know that? The 9 essential amino acids are the protein elements that we require on a daily basis. And it's all grown on a tree. Isn't that cool? Also really hardy, grows in the dry season. So for all of you aspiring farmers out there, there's such wonderful crops. Sorghum, millet, bambara groundnuts, marula, hibiscus. I mean, I could go on, and various other leafy greens. They're hugely nutrient dense, climate resilient, and totally world class. People are paying a fortune for them. And this is my favorite part of the story because it connects to the science that I do, the food science that I work in. Long before anybody could sequence a microbiome, that is that's your gut health, right? Our grandmothers, your grandmothers, our intergenerational family were fermenting. Amasi in Southern Africa, injera, or we can go on and on. We call it tradition, but science now is calling it functional food, and internationally they believe that this is new science, which I find absolutely fascinating. It's transformative. It's amazing. I spend my days in the intersection, obviously, of culinary craft. I'm a globally award-winning chef by trade, like I mentioned, but a food science specialist in microbiome, food science. Yes?
Hi, we need to jump into the main conversation.
No.
So we need to wrap up.
Oh no, you see, I can just go on and on forever. I'm going to have to type this all up and share it with everybody. But basically, I'm incredibly passionate about it, and I'm open to any questions about any of these superfoods and why they really need to be reintroduced, and the education around them needs to be really profound because our young and farmers and the youth of today, it's a forgotten science that it's going to be globally changing, and as awareness changes. I mean, as I said, I can talk for hours on the subject. So good luck. Ask any questions you like and I'll answer them as I can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Chef. Over to you, Chef Amaka.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kai, I'm really honored to be here. I'm speaking with everyone, top people that I admire from afar. I deeply appreciate this. And, speaking about this is something that I've discovered in my journey of becoming a chef. When I went to school, or rather, when I entered the food space, I was there to solve a problem of food poisoning. And in the process, I saw a food made with a Nigerian ingredient and it caught my attraction. And then in the process, I fell ill and I was limited to just a little kind of food. And then I knew because of my love for food, if I eat what these guys are telling me to eat, I will literally die. And in the process, I had to use my craft to develop recipes to help me. And I use that with Nigerian and African ingredients. And in the process, while doing that, I discovered that, oh, Nigerian ingredients has a lot at the table. Like, right, you can solve food problems, hunger, health, sustainability, including fine dining. Now, see, the truth is, when I'm reflecting on the topic, because I put some key points here, I I actually thought about it. I said our food is not what we eat; it is actually an ultimate storyteller, and we have been like that for a long time, right? If we bring ukwa, there is a story behind ukwa. There's a story behind opa. There's a story behind babab, like Chef Jody did, right? But for so long, the narrative around African food, is that is a symbol of survival, or you know right, there is a wrong narrative around Nigerian food, and being Nigerian African food, and being local is not bad. And the funny thing is that when I became the president of the Culinary Arts Practitioners Association, because yes, I'm a business owner, but I'm also the president of the Culinary Arts Practitioners Association, I decided to change the narrative about how people do it using my role and making everyone in the organization see this. And that is it. There is a different way. I always flip the side of the coin. Always, right? There is a different reality when it comes to our food. It is rich, it is complex, it's diverse. And the truth is, it is sophisticated if we look deep into it. And the problem is that, we have actually sidelined this, and we have embraced imported and westernized diets. Like right now, that some of us are having several health conditions, we are going for certain foreign foods without knowing that some of our foods can actually solve that. Recently, I posted something on my page and I used a trending song. This song in Nigeria, tell me why you go past 3,000 naira for boss. Yeah. Now I use that song to describe quinoa and ofada rice, because ofada rice has the same health benefits as quinoa, but quinoa is more expensive. Recently, I wrote a meal plan for somebody who had diabetes and hypertension, because I had a training to become a health chef after all my training in culinary arts, right? And I told them, can I add ofada rice? And he said, no, I want quinoa. And I was like, this is it, right? We have started embracing other people's food, embracing the wheat, the white sugars, and all those things. We are embracing it, and we are losing our culinary and our cultural identity. But this is the beautiful thing. The shift is already happening, right? I am not the only one. We have a good number of chefs that are changing the story, are changing the narrative. We are now going into something called culinary innovation, where we use the science and art of culinary arts, and we are trying to bring that expression with our foods. Today, we are no longer cooks. Like, we are not just cooks. Actually, in Kappa, we believe that in the food ecosystem, the culinary ecosystem, we consider the professional chefs, we consider the cooks as the custodian, because they are the ones that uphold the culture and the way the food is actually made. And we, the chefs that got the knowledge, we try find a way to use science and art, and then use from the knowledge of our cooks to build something spectacular with our Nigerian foods, knowing fully well that it solves different problems, right? So today we are trying to reclaim our indigenous food. We are not just serving it or trying to decorate it. What we are trying to do is we are trying to provoke nostalgia. Nostalgia is so powerful, right? And the truth is that we need to find ways to make it beautiful and all that. And my job as a chef and other chefs in Nigeria and Africa, some of us that are doing that, is to reimagine this food. Now, when we say reimagine, we are not saying that the food is lost. No, we are just saying that there are ways that the food can be expressed with modern culinary techniques. For example, we just heard about fonio. There are different ones. There's bambara nuts. We can get oppa. We can roast it. I just found out recently that you can roast it and eat it like ground nuts.
Hi, hi,
There are a
Chef
lot.
Amaka.
I'm almost done. And everything, like we are actually doing that because our ingredients is premium. So to just conclude, right? I just want to say that we are at a higher advantage, and that, you know, we need to build a lot of resilience in the food system space in Nigeria and Africa, and that we need to create much more opportunities for the youth to see the beauty of what we can offer and stick with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So you see, please, a round of applause for all our speakers. That's a fantastic introduction from everyone. You can already see the passion, the vigor at which we are all speaking, or they are all speaking, and it's really exciting to behold. Just before we begin, I don't want to lose anyone. Please, can we all put on our camera? I think our cameras are up. Can we be spotlighted just so that we can take a group virtual photo quickly? And then we would, that's for all the speakers, and then we would jump right into the conversation. Um, yes, I think we are good to go. Jacinta needs to be added as well. And yes. Okay, so I think we have to, we can't shake our face now. So whoever that is doing this, let us know where we are. So 1, 2, ready, go. Thank you so much. I think we've been captured. Yes, I think we've been captured. All right. Thank you, everyone. So now we are jumping into the conversation. So again, a bit of housekeeping rules. I know that we are all passionate, but I would like us to I like us to be mindful of time. We also need to have time for questions. So straight to the point, be it concise. Everyone knows that you guys are experts and you guys are phenomenal at your job, and I'm really excited about it. All right, so we'll start with Chef Jody. Fantastic introduction and reflection on what we're doing and what our grandmothers are doing. Can you tell us how can a new generation of African chefs use creativity and innovation to make indigenous foods relevant to contemporary audience without disconnecting them from their culinary roots? I'll take the question again, Chef Jody. How can a new generation of African chefs use creativity and innovation to make those indigenous foods that you've spoken about relevant to contemporary audience, whether it's in LA, whether it's in across the world, and without disconnecting them from their cultural roots? Over to you, Chef Jody.
Oh, that's one. So I'm going to try and keep this really, really brief. But I think my first rule would be really simple, and that would be respect first, then reinvent. And that innovation around the ingredients should make an elder proud, but a teenager curious at the same time. So keeping that all in mind, we need to start with an authentic ingredient and its story, and from then modernize the technique or format, for example, or the context, never the true soul of the ingredient when we use it. And I do feel that that still comes down to what I said earlier, where it's all an educational exercise. So, we need to be educating our consumers and our guests on these subjects. The provenance needs to be kept intact. Name the region, the crop, the community where it comes from, the ritual. The moment you strip that away, in my opinion, reinvention becomes really erased, and one needs to collaborate with the people and elders who hold all of this knowledge rather than extracting it. And this all goes through in terms of education, how food is handled, and the youth are the ones who are going to have to do this. As I said earlier, nutrition needs to feature, and not, I know I don't want to lecture, but these are functional foods, and we need to push our beautiful, functional, local ingredients to a base where that knowledge is really coming through. It's a genuine science-based reason to be excited and honest about our ingredients and to teach people about them. The test I use would really be, would your grandmother recognize the food and recognize the ingredient as the heart of the dish? And would a 19-year-old, 18-year-old want to try it? If both of those are yes, then you've innovated without disconnecting from the ingredients. And for me, that's the most important thing. And I feel the youth should really be pushing that globally, not just regionally.
Thank you so much, Chef Jody. I think that was really interesting. Respect as the foundation, looking at it as functional foods, as it's important for our nutrition, I'd like to hear Chef Zamaka's take on this, given that our diets right now, if you take Nigeria, for example, diets have evolved, lifestyle has evolved. Right now, there's a lifestyle, everyone is trying to be fit, everyone is looking at, everyone is, our culture has evolved. As Africans, our culture have changed, right? What was interesting to the last generation or the generation before that is not interesting to the current generation, which is the millennial, the Gen Z, and all of that. With that in mind, how do you still ensure that that cultural identity, knowledge, and stories, how do we reimagine these foods and ensure that we don't lose the identity and the knowledge? She was saying, can our grandmothers or people, can they recognize it? But how exactly do we make them recognize it, given that everything around us is changing? And how can we make it distinctive? Over to you, Chef Amaka.
Thank you so much, Messi. So, the most important thing I want to talk about is the flavor. The flavor shouldn't be lost as much as possible because the way it is made, like the grounds around which the meals are made, it shouldn't be lost. That's number one. Number two, storytelling. So, one of the things that we should do is actually tell stories of how this food has been able to solve certain problems in the past, trying to connect them with their roots, right? And that is the job of the chef, and that is what we do. Now, our menu, we don't just list it out. We list it out and then we tell them the story of why every of the ingredients matter. Now, the thing is that the truth is, like what you said, nostalgia can be boring, right? And that is because, the ones coming up do not understand, why our forefathers eat the way they eat. And also, as culture and lifestyles are changing, we need to make sure that some of the food suits that purpose. And that is the reason why I love the fact that, or I actually make noise or talk about the fact that we need more food researchers in Nigeria so that and in Africa, so that they can let us know like certain health benefits of certain foods, so that we can find a way that we can make them to suit the lifestyle that we are trying to achieve. And then we on the other side as chefs, we use the science and the art to reimagine it and create it in such a way that it looks presentable to everybody without losing the true essence of why it is. So I can get moi moi, for example, and whip it and it looks like a butter, but when you eat it, you know that it's moi moi, right? I can get Iru, for example, and turn it into a paste and make something nice. But when somebody tastes it, they know that it's Iru. So the whole essence is this: number one, the flavor; number two, the storytelling of the chefs, and then storytelling on the menu from us as chefs, bringing them back to their roots and understanding, and then reimagine this thing to make sure that, okay, this is something that it is acceptable in their eyes. So that is what I believe.
Thank you so much, Chef Amaka. That's interesting. The importance of having researchers to help us understand should I say, the relevance of the food that we are consuming now with whatever diets that we are on and all. I think that's really, really cool. Over to you, Dr. Anne. So we want to understand. I mean, we've talked about there's been a background analysis by every one of you around the fact that indigenous foods are celebrated as part of our heritage. You have done a lot of work around policies in Africa, around the South, yeah, around the Southern region, whether it's in Asia, in Africa, in Southern America. I want you to help us understand from your perspective, right? Many of these things, as you've known, they remain absent. Yes, you might say it moves, but how far does it move? Right? They remain absent from African diets or everyday diet rather. What do you think needs to change across the food system to move these foods from heritage to everyday consumption and livelihood? I'll take it again, right? What do you think needs to change across our food systems to make these foods from heritage, to move this food from heritage to everyday consumption and livelihood? Over to you, Dr. Anne.
Thank you. See, I think that's quite a part of that is the lack of hard data. How much of this food is moving? We do have some information and studies, particularly from Nigeria and also Kenya, about the volume of food moving within the country and also cross-border through the markets. I think the bigger problem with policy is that it has ignored the informality of these food systems, often of which the indigenous foods are traveling through. And so those don't get formalized and they don't get known. So vendors are often not registered, or they're trading, or they've got their whole supply network that is informal. It's hidden from the official statistics. It's hidden from even buyers. Buyers who might want to buy it can't just go, so availability and accessibility is not easy. You do see a lot of this produce in the markets, but I think it's almost had a kind of, well, that's like the poor food. Instead of the celebration that this is actually, let's be proud about our food. Let's be proud about these indigenous crops. And it is also resilient. It connects people back to their heritage. The other challenge is these foods are often grown in small pockets. So coming together and actually branding them, that has proven very successful in places like Uganda, where they've come and said food that comes from this region. I think Jody was talking about that. This is going to be branded like this. And it takes on a sense that it is everyday food, but it's also something more than everyday food in different ways. And I think that's where the policy story, the advocacy is also missing. We even find, even like Sun Business, they are focusing much more on the scalable foods, not on these indigenous foods. They're not recognizing the scale and the value, and that having small volumes of diverse food in different seasons is actually a great solution. It's part of our heritage. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So what I'm hearing is the lack of traceability, the lack of scale, right? The fact that there is no advocacy at should I say at that number we need to see. While some chefs are doing that at different levels, there needs to be, should I say, a holistic view of this food. There needs to be, should I say, we need to look at vendors who are selling this food, the market women, the missing middle. Policy also needs to recognize them. That's what I'm hearing. And of course, we need to have traceability so that we can know where these foods are coming from, whether it's in Nigeria, whether it's a village in Sokoto, whether it's a village in different parts of the world or different parts of Africa, for us to actually invest heavily. Thank you so much for that reflection. All right, we're going to the next question now. And I would like to ask Chef Amaka. You have talked about the role of chefs and also professionals. I know in your reflection before we started the main conversation, you've talked about the role that they play, but I want us to bring it home and I want you to conclude. In terms of these indigenous ingredients, how do we make them desirable and valued? I'm going to explain this. For example, some of the things you guys mentioned around baobab, around moringa, yes, they are good. As an African who's a millennium, I might not be so tuned to them because for moringa, for example, has a particular smell. My mother, on the other hand, who's of the other generation, loves it, right? I know. How do we ensure that those foods that are really not, they're not exciting when you see them? The same thing goes for the locust bean. Yeah, some of us use locust bean to cook. Now, for most people in the generation after mine, it's not a sexy food because of the smell, right? Especially when it ferments. How do we ensure that those foods, right, are visible, are desirable, and are valued within Africa and globally? Over to you, Chef Amaka.
Thank you so much. So, yay! And this is where we come in as chefs. So, one of the things that we do that I believe that will actually make people desire it. People may not agree with me when I say this, but let me say we are premiumizing. Yes, we need to premiumize these ingredients as chefs. Let me explain. The reason is because over time we have seen this food as former food. Oh, the smell, oh, the this is understandable. But the truth is, when we as chefs can use these ingredients in a different way, interpret it and show it in a different light, in different meals, and then it is showcased in top end restaurants, it's going to create a certain level of value. Let me give you an example. Online, there was someone that came online and said, How can I go and buy amala and ewedu, begiri and everything for 20-something thousand naira when Mama Put here is selling it at 5,000, at 2,500 naira? That is it. What we are trying to do is we are trying to put a certain level of premium or value on that food. You understand? Making them know that it solves a problem. It is actually desirable. It does not need to be local in the sense, but it can be premiumized. Now, when we do this, we are indirectly affecting, the supply chain. There is a supply chain empowerment because now when people see online, I mean, I literally told you that I saw somebody do something with our Nigerian foods and I was like, wow, imagine doing a goosey cream or a goosey bowl. I'm like, what? Right? And then I do certain things and people will tell me, because of you, this thing is going to be expensive. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I am putting value. Now, when we put value on these things, it's going to affect the supply chain because now you are showcasing that, oh, this ingredient can be expressed this way. And everybody will be like, is it the same ingredient? Okay, let me quickly try it out. So the chefs are premiumizing it. And then people are running to get it to make their own, right? And then the supply chain is moving, right? And then there's a global visibility. Right now, all over the world, there's no talk about jollof rice and egusi again. There's banga. I saw a white man eat banga soup. I was so impressed. I saw someone eat apang soup. I was so impressed. These are foods that people ignore. But there is a way that we chefs presented it that created a certain level of value, which also made people want to eat it. So yeah, I think premiumization, that premiumization strategy will help. And it has actually made a good, let me give this last example. Blending ugu in certain things to make cake, even when children don't like it. But when you make it and you give it to them, they get the health benefit, but they don't know that ugu is inside. When you tell them, eat your vegetables, and you tell them, and then you tell them there's vegetable in this, oh, mommy, it's nice. That is what we are talking about. So yeah, that's the strategy. Thank you.
That's an interesting strategy that most Nigerians, including myself, might probably fight you for. But okay, let's have it. Let's have it. That's okay. All right, thank you for that. I hear you though, because for many of us, myself included, we are very particular about what we eat. There are things that my mom pick. There are some leaves she picks, and I'm like, this is native doctor things. I don't know what you're doing, but yeah, it works. And interestingly, when we're having fever, she gives you a particular soup with a particular leaf, and you feel good. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but fine. Let's have it. All right, thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so Chef Jody, so I know that we've spoken about storytelling, so I wouldn't ask you about that, but I want you to tell us about what role can technology and new culinary experiences play in making these foods more exciting and desirable to younger generations? Maybe younger generations and not so young generations like myself who are a bit picky. So, what role can technology and new culinary experiences play in making these foods more exciting, more desirable? We've started talking about desirabilities, but how can we do it better? How can technology do that? And what other culinary experiences, other new culinary experiences play in doing this? Over to you, Chef Judy.
Amazing. It's very valuable topic and question. And I think that both our leading speakers really actually tapped into this a bit, but to take it further into the technology side of things, the role is actually the storytelling. And I think all three of us independently have pointed to that. But that's what's giving every ingredient its own identity. Once again, that we're talking about the origin, the farmer, rituals, big word at the moment, but very true. And all of the meaning behind the ingredients. And young consumers don't just eat the food, they buy into the narratives. So Indigenous foods have the richest narratives on earth. I just think we are telling them badly or not telling them at all, which is also what we're all discussing. Technology works on three fronts in my mind at the moment. It's social media and short video, and that's what's making the foods visible, shareable. And then third post or third pillar is science, and that's where it includes what I was talking about in the introduction, and that includes as well nutritional research. So to prove the benefits and give credibility, as well as food technology and e-commerce to stabilize these products and scale, which everyone else has been talking about. I think it all comes down to what our younger generations are really looking for. And that's Instagrammable. It's what's trending, it's what's hot, it's what's on TikTok or and that is, in my mind, how young people are going to get this knowledge and be able to push these products. New culinary experiences. Well, if you make heritage aspirational and not old school, in my mind, that's where the youngsters are really going to drive the force. So things like pop-ups, including heritage ingredients and local ingredients in pop-up stores, tasting menus, for example, festivals. So collaborating and turning Indigenous food into something that people will travel for, and post about it once again. I think is really important, because that's where the desire is going to build through the experience, and not through obligation, but through the experience. The traditional or Indigenous ingredient food story itself is a gift for reaching the youth, I think, because subjects such as gut health, energy, immunity, let's think of some others, natural nutrition, for example, are exactly what our young consumers are actually already wanting. So our Indigenous ingredients deliver that authentically, not as a trend borrowed from elsewhere, but it has its own story to tell. So in my opinion, I really feel that's where we can be driving this to the youth.
Thank you so much. I think that's I like the whole trendy thing. I'm not gotten into TikTok yet, but I see it. I see clips and I feel it works. I will get there. All right, Dr. Anne, I really want us to, against the things that Chef Jody and Chef Amaka have said around desirability, and you also spoke about scale, right? There needs to be, we've seen the small demand, it might not be as huge of a demand, but we've started seeing those demand for these indigenous foods by chef, some of them in this room, and I can see some of them in the comments. Against this demand for these indigenous foods, how can we build viable markets that captures the missing middle, those vendors you talked about? How can we build viable markets around them without the commercialization of these foods eroding their cultural identity? For example, in Nigeria, or in even some of these other African countries, when you go to the supermarket and you're trying to buy this product, you don't recognize them, and we've seen that several times. You don't know that. Sometimes you might not know that this is a product that probably grew in your grandmother's house or your mother's house, and you have something, you have a tree for you, you might not know. So how do you ensure that in building this viable market around them, how do we ensure that the commercialization of this product do not erode their cultural identity, the traditional knowledge, and also the position of communities that have sustained them? Happy to take that again. As the demand for this indigenous food, as they grow, how can we build viable markets around them without the commercialization of these foods eroding their cultural identity, traditional knowledge, or the position of communities that have sustained them? Over to you, Dr. Anne.
Yeah, it's very true when something becomes popular. And just a note on TikTok, it's lots of misinformation as well that we discovered. But okay, in terms of the markets, you have two things. You can actually work together. Sometimes in Kenya, for example, they've got an SME cooperative. It doesn't specifically focus, unfortunately, on indigenous producers or on farmers markets. But having those bodies come together using cooperatives to actually have a voice, to champion, at least for some branding legislation, which does then protect the food that they've got. It'll be the food from here will always be called this. That's very important. The markets themselves, there are a lot of public markets, or public and private, that are owned by state or are in partnership with the government, wholesale and the small markets. We've been trying to we're actually working with ICLEI and a whole lot of other people to try and get investment in the markets, because it touches so many people in the value chain as well as in the market themselves. And these markets are also places of experimentation. That is the place where you don't know if this is going to sell, people will like it. You can actually go to the market because you can speak to somebody. That's the difference with the supermarketization of Africa, is you can't speak to somebody and say, oh, tell me about this fruit. Some of the more expensive shops, like I think Woolworths in South Africa, they have these big boards and you sort of see where your food came from. But you have to kind of see how can you replicate, how can you strengthen that relationship that you have in a market where you can say, tell me about this food. When is this other food coming through? How should I cook this? Where, how does it go? So those conversations, whether you use technology, or whether you use the markets, or whether you have people starting to sell the same story, it is about selling the same story about where these come from and having the follow-up questions, particularly in the testing and the experimentation stage. This is a perfect place for SMEs to test and trial. That didn't work. People didn't really buy that. Let me try another way of doing it. And at the same time, you have the inspiration of champion chefs where people are starting to say, wow, did you see that? It was like this over there. So it's a mixture. But legislatively, it is about getting that branding, and particularly to secure your community. Food that is gathered from this area will be known as this. And local governments and city governments can also be part of that partnership. So anyway, I think that there are some ideas there.
That's it's not one idea. So those ideas are interesting. The collaboration definitely needs to happen. The co-ownership of these markets, I think, would also support that. In a situation like for most African countries, where while the government might own the market, there's really little to no involvement in terms of how to ensure, should I say, ensure that we're not losing our heritage or anything. But I think this is really useful point, and it's something to take note of. Thank you so much for that. All right. To the next question. Over to you. Yeah. Over to you, Chef Jody. So now we've talked about chefs a lot around what they are doing, what they could do. And you've talked about, the fact that young farmers can look at some of these things, some of these foods as the next thing to invest in. But what support and opportunities do you think young chefs, young food entrepreneurs need to build sustainable careers and enterprises around indigenous food and culinary heritage? I'll take that again. So what support and opportunities do young chefs and food entrepreneurs need actually to build sustainable careers and enterprises around indigenous food and culinary heritage? All of this it's relatively new. Most of the African businesses or food businesses in Africa, for example, in Kenya, even in Nigeria, where we have amazing chefs, is really we sell food. How do we ensure that they're able to build a career around this conversation and what they're doing around indigenous food? Over to you, Chef Jody.
Okay, also a good question. I think Dr. Anne has covered some of the points that I would have made, but I'll just mention them briefly. As an entrepreneur myself, having started a business when I was in my early 20s, mid-20s, I want to say one thing as a generic point when any of us are starting a business, whether it's around indigenous ingredients or anything else, and that's please remember, this might sound strange, but please remember it's a business, not a charity. Okay, so guys, at the end of the day, as passionate as we all are about business, and subject matter, at the end of the day, we still have to live whilst, building knowledge base and what have you. So I think that the overarching goal really, that people see when they see indigenous ingredients is that they need to be processed and branded, but still valued, and their roots need to be in Africa, which we have all discussed throughout the seminar. We need to capture their worth to, as Chef Zamaka's point, we really need to capture their worth and connections to the farmers. But the problem is, to Dr. Anne's point, reliable value chains, so connections to the farmers, building up those relationships as an entrepreneur, how are the crops grown, where are the crops grown, and to make sure that the supply is consistent and works for both sides, and that both sides earn fairly, going back to money, because business is money. And many of these foods are actually wild harvested or under-farmed, which we spoke about earlier. And so enterprise only works if the supply does. So if there's no supply and consistent supply, you're going to fall short in an entrepreneurial business or any business. Of course, access to finance, which we also spoke about. Where is the capital coming from for these young food businesses? Who are the backers? Who are the committed buyers as well? Are they restaurants? Are they retailers? Are they food institutions? Those are questions that a young person would need to answer as well. And there are answers to all of these, but these are things that I would say young people would have to think about. One of our big gaps in my mind is the blended training around as a chef, and as chefs in general in the industry, I feel like our culinary skills are honed in on and are really refined. But where are the business tools? Where are the food science tools and the food safety knowledge to make this industry into a business? Those to me are often very much lacking, and vice versa, or other way around. And so the protection and fair value to the Indigenous knowledge as well would be a big point. And investment into local R&D. Now, Chef Samaka said that earlier, and I couldn't agree with you more. That the R&D processing, NPD, and the knowledge. And from all of this, I would say that in order to make these things successful, young people, whether they be farmers, food scientists, chefs, whatever business you're going into, really need to tap into mentorship programs and networks such as this. And that's where the value really is added. You are learning from people who've been there, done that, with different skill sets. And then you feel like you're not building alone. So in a nutshell, I'd love to also go on about this subject. That's where I feel young people should really be focusing on the roots, the foundations, and asking a lot of questions about how to run businesses before just running out there, throwing money at it and hoping that it works.
So you need to learn how to run a business before throwing money into it and hoping that it works. Thank you so much for that. That's fantastic. Please give her a virtual round of applause. All right, so let's go to Chef Amaka. I also want to hear your thoughts around this. Should I say, from your perspective, I just want to hear, what do you think food entrepreneurs and local chefs needs to do? I mean, this is, I think, your bread and butter as the president of CAPA, right? To build careers and businesses around African culinary heritage and indigenous foods.
Okay. So first of all, I would say we need to decolonize. How will I say it so that it doesn't feel offensive? We need to decolonize African culinary education. And this is why our curriculum is heavily dependent on French cuisine, right? And they prioritize the French cuisine and its script without knowing that while that is, I'm not discarding it, we refuse to put enough importance to the way we cook, and the way we do our things. For example, our fertilization, our what's this thing called? Our fermentation methods, our slow cooking method. Each and every one of these things should be in the curriculum. I believe that one of the things that I am advocating for, especially right now as the president, I am actually pushing for African and Nigerian gastronomy to be in the curriculum as much as possible, so that way a young person, as against leaving Iru and Ogiri or Dadawa for the elders to make, the young ones should be able to make them instead of leaving how the way they roast or the way they make certain food processes. It should be taught in schools, so that way they can build a business out of it. You understand? They understand other deep and robust cooking techniques. I'm having the opportunity now to travel to different communities in Nigeria, for example, and I found out that there are meals that are in Nigeria that are uncooked, but they eat them. Now, why is it not in our curriculum? That is one of the things that should be addressed. The second thing is that some of our foods have the long way it is being processed, which will take the interest from the younger generation, right? The young entrepreneurs need a certain level of infrastructure. I want to add to what a doctor actually said, because the truth is that most of our foods require hard labor or hard techniques for us to get the desirable product. For example, I don't know, I like going back to my roots. I'm an Igbo woman from the southeast part of Nigeria, and there's a food called ukwa. Now, ukwa, For you to get ukwa, that breadfruit has to fall down from the tree. Now, once it falls down, it needs to decay. Now, this decay takes a longer time before you now start removing it, peeling the seed, peeling the back off, boiling, all that. It takes a long process. Hence, the reason why it is one of the most expensive grains in Nigeria. Now, if there are certain opportunities where there is food tech and it meets entrepreneurship, like if there is an opportunity where that can meet, it will create an avenue for people to create certain pre-processed product without going through the long route. We are already having people doing that. As against pounding bambara nuts, we now grind them. I understand that it has built a certain level of distrust because people now mix certain things, but I believe that you have a certain level of integrity and you show people through the process, and then there are policies that are put in place to make sure that there is no contamination whatsoever. Our traditional foods will now become more convenient for urban customers, and then people can come into it. And lastly, I want to talk about mentorship. One of the things I struggled as a chef was that I didn't get mentorship. Everything I know as a chef, I toiled, I studied, I did everything. I made my mistakes for the past 10 years in food business and 8 years in culinary arts. And one of the things I'm passionate about is mentorship. And I feel like if investors can see that there is value in African gastronomy and can create opportunities for young chefs like myself or Chef Jody or anyone to mentor these young people, show them the business side of food. I started making profits 5 years after being in business. I didn't have a mentor to teach me that. I had to learn how to cook in a canteen to understand that. Now, when there is a mentorship in place, it becomes a smart cut and something desirable for people to come in. And then we are now showing how Pan Africa restaurateur and everything plays. So mentorship and investment will really, really go a long way. So that is my take. Because if I keep talking, I'm not gonna stop. So let me end there.
Thank you, Chef Amaka. Just before we go to the final last question, and then we'll open the floor for questions, I just want all of us to give a virtual round of applause for Chef Jody. She's dropped off now, but she was kind enough to walk us through her thought process, and I think that was really fantastic. So thank you to her. I know this recording is going to be there, so she's going to see this. Thank you, everyone, for participating. All right, Dr. Anne, we have been coming to you, or we've been circling around conversations around policy. Chef Amaka talked about policy. So for this last question, I want to understand, how can traditional local food markets in whether it's the urban areas or rural areas in Africa, how can we leverage partnerships and public procurement? How can that create stronger pathways for indigenous foods to reach consumers? You had the conversation, or you had the reflection by Amaka around ukwa and the fact that you need to wait for a particular time to get decayed, it needs to fall from the tree. All of those things are barriers. How can rural urban partnership, public procurement create stronger pathways for indigenous foods to reach consumers, particularly while creating opportunities for women and young people? Over to you, Dr. Anne.
Thank you. I think at the beginning I sort of mentioned, in a way, there are two main markets for food. One, it will go through the local traditional markets, and then of course it can go to supermarkets and overseas, but in the local context. And the other one is when the state, the government, buys the food, values-based food procurement. And up until recently, until really the school meals thing took off, people just said we've got public procurement. The public procurement law for all government entities, local and national, these are the rules. You just buy low cost. And that, of course, didn't have anything else that sort of said we want nutrition diversity, we want to include women, we want to include youth. It didn't have any of those things. But there has been a definite shift now. And in fact, in South Africa, they've changed their Public Procurement Act just now in 2024. It's just rolling out now to say it must be values-based food procurement. Values about small businesses. X% of every tender must have this kind of small business. It must include women. It must have use. Where we don't see more of is they are starting to sort of say what kinds of food mixes. So they say if you're going to buy all of this for a school meal, you need to actually have 10% leafy green vegetables. And there we're not seeing any mention of indigenous foods or the value of them, of the leafy greens. And part of that is evidence, the scientific evidence to back it up. But that is definitely a gap that can be included. It's already, the legislation is there. Now you just say, well, we advocate now that it must be leafy greens or even the baobab, that people, and particularly children, see the food every day. So it becomes part of their familiarity now. The same way that all these McDonald's and whatever else were part of their familiarity, it can be very, and it's huge. The scale of the public buying, not only for schools, but for hospitals, prisons, government canteens, is huge. It's one of the biggest buyers. What you don't want to do, and more research needs to be done, is then sort of divert the stream of food, indigenous food, just going now to public procurement and not going into your markets, because they're now almost competing for pricing. So there is something about that as well. But yes, in values-based food procurement, even a lot of the big cities, the city networks like ICLEI, Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, they are all now advocating that procurement needs to have more than just lowest cost. It must be, as I mentioned, and also the address of indigenous communities is coming in. So already there's a lever. If there are indigenous communities, what about indigenous food? It just has not been spelt out enough that this is, what are the health implications? What is the value add to it? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Please, can we have a virtual round of applause for all my speakers? Chef Amaka, Dr. Anne, Dr. Jody. I think you ladies have been amazing. The conversation has been fantastic. I see that there are a lot of agreements in the group chat, not really questions. So I want to, because of time, I'm not going to leave a lot of room for that, because we're almost approaching, we're already half the hour into, and a lot of people have to go. It's close of business and close of day in different countries. So thank you so much for this. Um, in terms of what we've learned a lot of things. First of all, the foundation of whatever we're doing is foundation of respect. When we're thinking about indigenous foods, when we're thinking about food that represent our heritage as Africans, we need to look at it from a respectful lens, and that would help us approach it properly. We also need to look at our stories. What stories do we tell ourselves? What stories do we tell the people? Whether as chefs, whether as decision makers, whether as policy actors, what kind of stories do we tell? Because the stories make them desirable. The stories might lead to scalability. If we don't have the right stories about our local dishes, people might reject them because they don't know the importance of them. Especially today, when we're seeing that there's a lot of change in our diet, there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of need for awareness around different health issues, particularly as women. So we need to know the importance, and storytelling can help us do that. And there's also an importance and need for researchers in the food space. It's important to look at food not just as what we consume, but also as an avenue to strengthen, should I say, our region as Africans. So we need to have researchers that help us actually develop research that speaks to the work we've done in food, and especially around our diet. Policy is a vital part of the food system. Whether we like it or not, we need to look at public-private partnership. We need to look at the missing middle, the women, the youth, creating this food, selling this food at the bottom of the pyramid. Last mile vendors needs to be captured. If we're going to have research that supports the work we're doing, if we're going to have our voice out there, we need to have policy. And policy is backed by research. No one is going to create any laws, going to invest in a place where they do not know or they do not have market research. So market research needs to cover the last mile vendors, the missing middle, everyone in between. And then how do we ensure desirability? Part of it we've talked about storytelling. We've also talked about technology. Chef Dodi was talking about TikTok and all of that, and Amaka was doing Clockit. That was interesting, right? But we need to ensure that we are careful, yeah, and that we are able to put the right stories out there, because this is our food. Remember, we need to be respectful. So thank you very much, ladies, for your time. for your willingness to join us. It's been a good 1.5 hour plus listening to you, and I'm really excited about this conversation. For those of us who have asked about the recording, it will be online for us to look at. And I know we will be communicating next steps to you. This is our first meeting, and a lot will be coming to us as we proceed. So thank you, everybody. My name is Mercy Olorunfemi. I'm going to hand back now to Jacinta, who's our president, and she will be talking to us. So my name is Mercy Olorunfemi again. I work with GAIN. I lead SME work across 6 countries: Nigeria, Uganda, Benin, Mozambique, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And so happy to talk to you about SMEs, happy to talk to you. Please reach out, please connect with me, and then we'll go further. Over to you, Jacinta. Thank you so much, guys.
Right. Thank you so much. And another round of applause for Mercy. She's done a great job in moderating us. And Mercy happens also to be part of the experts in our committee on innovation, entrepreneurship, and partnerships. No wonder we are talking about partnerships, and we are reaching out to all of you to partner with us in this journey as we work towards ensuring that we have, we celebrate our cultures, we reclaim our Africa's food heritage, and building healthier and resilient food secure continent in Africa. So thank you very much, Mercy, and thank you to our speakers, Chef Jody, who has dropped off earlier on, Million, who also dropped off earlier. Thank you, Chef Amaka. Thank you, Dr. Annie, for staying on. We appreciate. And yes, we've been monitoring the chat. I was busy looking at the chat to see communication coming in. I see invitations to your various networking events, your various technical sessions that will be happening around, the topic on sustainable gastronomy. So yes, we shall be reaching out to you, and we encourage you to also reach out to us so that we can connect, because we can't do this alone as the network, the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship Alumni Network. We invite you to collaborate with us. So before we close out, at any opportunity for possible questions or even comments, I just wanted to see, there was a hand that was up earlier on, and I went back to see whether the hand was still up, but I did not see it anymore. So I just wanted to give a minute or two to see if there are any questions or comments. Maybe you'd like us to give you an opportunity to make a comment. We don't want to leave out any opportunity for that. So there was a hand that was up, and I don't see it anymore. I don't know if you still have a question. We don't want to lock you out, but just to appreciate, as Mercy has mentioned, that there is a lot that has come in on the chat, and we will want to stay connected with all of you. So checking across the room just to see if there are any hands up. And once again, just appreciating that inputs that have come in through the chat. We'll definitely reach out to you. We'll keep connecting with you in the network. So thank you also to the Africa Food Changemakers Secretariat. You've given us quite a lot of support. In fact, we are hosted on a Zoom platform of the Africa Food Change Makers. So thank you very much to the entire Secretariat and the Africa Food Change Makers. We appreciate. Thank you even for pushing this communication about this event to the social media platforms. We appreciate, and we don't take it for granted that we've come together not only as the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship Alumni Network fellows, but also we've come together with the Africa Food Change Makers Network and stakeholders from government, from academia, from civil society, private sector. We look forward to connecting with all of you. So today has reaffirmed that indigenous foods are essential to the future of our Africa food systems. For me, actually, I also work day to day as the head of programs at the Eastern Africa Grain Council, where we talk about grain day in, day out. And we have, forgotten grains. And I liked the conversations around various types of grains that are also indigenous and traditional to us. And, they have a very big opportunity, in as far as contributing to nutrition and even gut health and all that, especially even even fermented types of grains. So yes, this conversation is very key and dear even to our day-to-day work that we do in our various organizations and even in our own menus at home. I particularly liked reading that somebody has even, baobab powder in their kitchen cabinet, and so that was exciting to see that we live every day when we live, and every day as we engage. Let's continue celebrating our cultures. Let's continue reclaiming Africa's food heritage because that's will continue to be quite dear to us. So one thing that I took note, for example, from the speakers earlier on, is that if we embrace our traditional foods, we will continue to support agroecology, we'll continue to support and even empower youth and women because there's such an opportunity in investing in such agribusinesses. Thank you very much, Chef Amaka, even for the encouragement that you are resilient enough to wait on until 5 years later when you started making profits. That's quite encouraging. So we shouldn't give up. If you're a young, person out there, you're investing in traditional foods or even agribusinesses in this space, feel encouraged because there's still an opportunity if you continue diligently and actively, learning lessons and putting in best practices and making it work as much as possible and, getting mentorship as much as possible. I think mentorship has also come out quite strongly. Thank you very much to our speakers for bringing that out as well. So if we embrace our traditional foods, again, we have an opportunity to improve nutrition and gut health. I think that has come in quite outrightly through the discussion. Protecting our biodiversity is something else that has also come in. Building sustainable food systems as we engage on sustainable gastronomy as a pathway towards such sustainable systems. We are excited that this conversation today was possible. So clearly, transforming Africa's food systems requires collaboration, and like I mentioned earlier, we can't do it alone, and we are very much committed as a network. The LAF network is very much committed towards connecting leaders, connecting even policymakers, fostering innovation around such conversations, including even gastronomy that we've spoken about today. We are keen to amplify African food stories, as you have heard even from our earlier speakers, from Chef Jody, Chef Amaka. We are very keen to influence policy, as we've heard from Dr. Annie, and she's linked that quite well with the market systems and food systems. So thank you very, very much, Dr. Annie, for that. So as I mentioned, we can't do this alone, and that's why we are calling out for partnerships. And Mercy, our moderator, has also mentioned that this is a first of a kind, and we are overwhelmed and excited about the turnout for this session. And just to mention to you that look out for more of this that will be coming up. Look out even for the opportunity for the next cohort for the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship. We've mentioned earlier on, I think some of you may not have joined by the time I was presenting about the network. We shall have the next cohort coming up in November 2026. So between now and November 2026, expect to hear from us. Look out for our social media announcements and our website, so that then if you know of a woman that is out there, that is a leader with potential, to foster innovation around Africa's food systems, influencing policy around food systems, and even amplifying Africa's food stories, we would like to connect with them. So feel free to self-nominate yourself or even nominate a woman that you know that will be able to, create that kind of change in our Africa's food systems. So we invite governments, we invite development partners, we invite academia, we invite investors that are keen to invest in this space. We invite civil society to partner with LAN, with the network that we belong to, so that then we can drive this agenda together. Let's promote indigenous foods, let's advance research, let's continue to shape policy, let us continue, accelerating sustainable food systems transformation across Africa. And we hope that today's conversation begins stronger partnerships and collaborative and collective action. So we look forward to working with you in this journey. And let's continue to connect. I want to bring back on the screen. I earlier on shared with you a presentation, and I also shared the contacts of how you may connect with us. So I'd like to finish up with that screen whereby we share with you our contacts so that then you can stay connected with us. But we promise to stay connected with you. Remember, as you are signing up for this event, you registered, and so we got your contacts. As we have mentioned, we will be able to, the recording will be available to you. And for this 2 or 3 slides that were shared earlier on, we'll confirm with the chef that, with Dr. Annie, that those can be shared with you. And because you're in our network, you are in our database, we should be able to share that with you as well. So this brings us to the end of the program. We shall stay in touch with you. Let's continue the conversation beyond here on social media and even through email communication. I am bringing back the slide as I have mentioned. We'd like to continue the conversation. And so for partnerships, for membership inquiries on the Africa Food Change Makers platform, remember the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship Alumni Network is part of the Africa Food Change Makers. So if you'd like to become a member of the Africa Food Change Makers, you're welcome to reach out to us so that we can keep you informed, not only about the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship programs, but also other programs that are exciting that you can participate. For media requests and even general questions about the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship Alumni Network, please reach out to us. My email is also provided in the section around partnerships. There we have Adana, one of our the program, she's a program coordinator at the Africa Food Change Makers Secretariat. And the next email there is my email. Once again, my name is Jacinta Mwau. I head programs at the Eastern Africa Grain Council. That's my email. And I also am the president of the Leading Africa Women in Food Fellowship Network. It's a pleasure to work with the 84 women that are changing the narrative of the Africa food systems, and looking forward to getting more women joining this network in the cohorts that we have mentioned that are coming up. So let's stay connected. Let's keep the conversation active, and looking forward to engage with you for partnership opportunities when the opportunity arises. So thank you very much, everybody, and that brings us to the end of our session today. I think this gives us about 15 minutes to the top of the hour. And yes, once again, it was exciting to connect with all of you, and looking forward to future opportunities, future similar engagements like this in the near future. So thank you very much, everybody. And that brings us to the end of the program. I don't see a hand up. So
Yes,
we are...
Jacinta, my hand is up, but also the screen didn't show the contacts. So maybe,
okay.
yeah, it didn't show. But also my hand is up.
Okay, so Anne, why don't you take the stage for the question or the comment that you had as I share back the screen. Thanks very much for the notification. Anne, your hand was up, so you have something to say? Hello?
Okay, we also have Andrew's hand raised up. I think he has a question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the host had not allowed me to unmute, but it is unmuted now. Yeah, thank you so much. Once again, I'm Anne Grace Akiteng from Uganda. I'm a climate change activist. I am also a member of the Africa Food Change Makers. I did the course and I was very excited. Actually, saw this advert through the Africa Change Makers Network. My question, I want to appreciate so much the presenters. It was a very good one. I was interested in the contacts so that I can follow up to see how to become a member, but also to ask other questions like issues to do with mentorship, partnership, yeah, because it is very, very important for us to move on. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. So let me share back the screen so that you can stay connected, and very good to hear from you, Anne, all the way from Uganda. Thank you for joining us today. So I
We
hope
have
now you
Andrew's
can
hand
see
up.
my, yes, can you now see my screen? Adana, maybe you can confirm?
Yes, we can see your
Okay, great.
screen.
Yes, and you are pointing me to someone
Presentation
else.
window. Andrew.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah. Andrew Darami. I'm from Sierra Leone. I'm the Research Development Officer for Suma Agro Business Industry in Sierra Leone. So I will have a question, but first of all, before I ask the question, I would like to appreciate the presenters, the organizers of this great Zoom meeting. So here is my question, right? So linking cultural heritage, local biodiversity and ecological farming, how can this reshape the way we produce food to sustain gastronomy in Africa? So that is my question.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. Dr. Annie, would you like to take this question? It's quite very much linked to your earlier insights. I hope Dr.
Just
Annie.
no, I'm here. I'm just clarifying the question. So, how can we scale it and at the same time also look after the soil and the biodiversity? Is that right, Andrew?
Yes.
So indigenous products, it's one of those anomalies. I'm not talking about things like sorghum, or I'm just speaking about African foods or root, arrowroot or madumbis. But some of the other, like the leafy greens, they're not always as easy to grow. They will grow everywhere, except sometimes when you want to do it commercially in a certain space. So there's a lot more research to be done there, because the way of actually farming it has tended to be small plots and or gathering, going in and gathering. And that is part of the future innovation area. How do we make this more together? How do we coordinate? How do we bring everybody that's growing? No, we need to first know who is growing what and where. And no government at the moment does that. No, even small SME cooperative. And that is one of the keys. Mapping out who's growing what, where, and when, and how can you support them. And I'm a strong believer in the value of government's health community workers and agricultural extension officers. I think those are the key. They are there every day. They have the trust of the communities. What we need is more investment during these days, because we already know that when somebody switches, I did quite a big study with
Dr. Anne, you're muted.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know. But we do know during the transition, when farmers transition to new ways, more agroecological or even only organic, there is a 3-year period in terms of when the yields drop. There's no financial support for them for various reasons I mentioned earlier, and they need technical support. And once they pass those 3 years, then they move forward. And this is not just an Africa case. Brazil is finding that as well, that you need 3 to 5 years of support, which for people to transition. So yes, hopefully that helps.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I see more hands, but in the interest of time, we'd like to close it at that. Clearly, the conversation is quite exciting and interesting. So we would like to close at this so that we don't end up losing majority of the participants. So this brings us to the end of the program. We shall be putting together a communication, a one-pager or so, which will also ask the speakers, as you heard them mention, they can go on and on with the topic because they are also very passionate about it. So we'll be looking forward to, putting together a knowledge product where we have the speakers contribute towards that paper. And so we hope that that paper will start off and spark conversations and interactions beyond today. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, our speakers. Thank you, our moderator, Mercy. And thank you to the Africa Food Change Makers. And most importantly, thank you to our participants for staying on until the end. We appreciate your time and looking forward to connecting with you in future. Have a good evening. I believe majority of us are in the evening. So wherever you are, have a good day, have a good evening. Goodbye.